Hey everybody, welcome back to my podcast. I'm back, second week in a row. Woohoo! Anyway, I have been thinking about other things to record for a while now because obviously I've been gone, and so I've been thinking about what I was going to post and then didn't. Anyway, and I kind of gave you a teaser for this last week. So the title is Strategic Watering, and you're like, what the heck? Am I starting a garden here? And the answer is kind of. So I'm not actually going to start a garden with you or tell you how you should garden, though the other day I was at my grandparents' house and my grandpa was watching YouTube videos about how to plant onions, and they've planted onions for several years in the past, but he just wanted to learn more. And I ended up learning so much about onions. Apparently there's 3 different types of daylight growing or something. So there's a long day, a short day, a midday, and it's how much sunlight there is in a day, and it affects how much they grow and yada yada yada. Anyway, so you're supposed to see where you live in the United States or where you live in the world, see how long your days are, and then grow onions according to how long daylight is in your area. Anyway, learned all this cool stuff. But I'm not talking about that, so if you want to go watch those videos on YouTube, they're everywhere. There's so many videos about gardening. But I'm not going to talk about gardening in that aspect. I'm going to talk about the behavior garden. And I will give credit where it's due. This is all from my experimental analysis of behavior class, which I am obsessed with. I love this class so much. I love it. In fact, I think saying I love it is an understatement. I'm obsessed with it. I have the textbook. I normally buy the textbooks, but I bought the textbook and I have read every single page so far that we've done, every unit. And I love it. It's so interesting and so intriguing. And normally textbooks are so hard to read, it's but I love it. I love it. And definitely some chapters are more interesting than others, but I feel like some things that I have learned have absolutely blown my mind. And so I wanted to share a few different things with you. And honestly, I could probably create several episodes, at least 5 on this class, because I've learned so many cool things. Today I'm going to talk about the behavior garden, and this is something that she specifically shared in class, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to write this down. And she also talked about strategic watering, so I'm also taking the title from her, but it was so good that I just have to share. So credit's where it's due. Thank you, my dear friend professor. Okay, so this is about behaviors, okay? And she was talking about how babies, so this is going to apply specifically to parenting. And honestly, it can apply to literally anything. In fact, the book talks about how it can apply to all of the different things. It talks about how it can apply to home settings, school settings, work settings, animal settings, zoo settings. Anyway, it applies everywhere. But this specifically is about parenting, okay? So she talked about how babies come with their own seeds. So they're born and they have their own seeds that no one can control. No one can control what seeds they're born with. They're just born with these seeds and they come with them. And there's this basic garden. There's just seeds planted and there's nothing that's growing yet, right? The seeds are just all in there. And so she was talking about how we water these seeds and how we should strategically water the seeds. So the seeds are behaviors, and this could be a good behavior or a bad behavior. So maybe a bad behavior could be tantruming or physical aggression or not being able to sit still. And that's not necessarily a bad behavior, right? Not being able to sit still. That's just a behavior that someone came with, right? And then there's good behaviors like being tenderhearted and caring about others and being able to self-soothe and things like that. And those are all behaviors that kids just come with, right? Depends on what seeds they come with, but they just come with certain behaviors. What she was talking about is how parents can hugely and greatly and highly affect the seeds that their kids grow, and how behaviors can be reinforced to increase, and other behaviors that we don't want can be ignored, and hopefully those seeds will wither and die. So to be a little dramatic, she did say wither and die a few different times, so I'm going to say it. So this is just in the example of seeds, right? Plants, seeds, behaviors, they're going to wither and die. So she was saying, if you stop watering a behavior, so you stop giving attention to it, you stop reinforcing it, it will wither and die. And maybe you're thinking, why would I reinforce a bad behavior? Well, reinforcing doesn't mean that you purposely want a behavior to increase. Reinforcing can be anything that increases a behavior, increases it in strength, increases it in frequency. So if someone acts out because they like the attention they get, they don't care that it's negative, they like the attention that I get, then every time they act out and someone gives them attention, then they are being reinforced because they are getting the attention after the behavior to get the attention. Now let's say someone hates bad attention. So they have a behavior, a parent gives them negative attention, and then they never do it again. That's not reinforcing because the behavior is not increasing. So anytime a behavior increases in strength or frequency, it is being reinforced. And there's lots of different theories for this, but basically the law of effect is something that Edward Thorndike came up with, and he was the first one to look into operant conditioning and operant learning. And he believed that the law of effect says that behaviors are a function of its consequence. As in, we perform behaviors and we act a certain way because of its reinforcing effects. And so each behavior has a reinforcing effect, or we wouldn't do the behavior. Maybe that's confusing, and to be honest, the book obviously goes in so much more depth, and there's different theories and different things, and yada, yada, yada. But it's its basic level. When a behavior increases, it is being reinforced. And so if you stop watering a behavior, if you stop giving attention to it, if you stop reinforcing it, it will wither and die. Because there's no point in continuing the behavior if it doesn't get those reinforcing effects. Another thing that she was talking about, though, is if this little seed is grown because it's been watered a lot, it's been reinforced a lot, and it's really big, it'll be a lot harder and it will take way longer to wither and to get smaller. But it will. It still will. If you ignore and if you stop watering the behavior, it will wither and die. She also did say, though, that there are some plants, and maybe they're like cacti, or she said a different plant, but I can't remember what it was, and I didn't know how to spell it, so I was like, cacti's close enough. So some are like cacti, though, and they're really hard to get rid of. You may stop watering it for a while, and it just still lives. They just stick around no matter what the environment is. But it's important to continue to reinforce good plants and continue to water good plants and good behaviors, and hopefully you can reinforce the good behaviors enough that those naughty plants or the plants that you don't want don't have a strong effect. The other thing too is that if it's kind of like the wolf proverb. Have you heard that one before? There's, there's two wolves, and there's a good wolf and there's a bad wolf, and it's whatever one you feed gets stronger, and I don't know. Have you heard that one before? Do you know what I'm talking about? If you don't, it's okay, because the garden metaphor is just fine. But it's kind of the same. And so we also talked about how some of these plants are like orchids, and they take careful attention, and you need to water it daily, and you need to make sure you're watching it. And so that might be certain behaviors that you want to increase, and you have to be careful to give it careful attention and to care about it and to water it and to reinforce those activities and how those plants will grow. Another thing that she talked about is how we always need water. Our whole lives, we're always going to need water. It continues forever. Needing water does not end. It just doesn't. The reinforcing effects of water may change over our lives, as an adult, we may not get as much reinforcement from little things that we did as a kid. But we always, always, always need reinforcement. We always, always, always need things, and we always need water. I mean, physically and metaphorically. And so intrinsic motivation can be things that internally is our own water, things that matter to us that we can apply that we can, motivate ourselves to do, things that internally are motivating. Something that was kind of shocking to me, and not shocking, but it just made so much sense, is that we talked about extinction bursts. So basically, if you don't water a plant and it starts to die, that's kind of like extinction. So if you don't like a behavior, you put it on extinction, which means you no longer reinforce the behavior. So with this little sniffy rat, he's a little computer simulation that's part of the lab for the class, and he's trained to act like an actual rat. And obviously he doesn't act exactly like a rat because he's a computer simulation and not a real life rat. But we have been doing different experiments with him, and we have trained him to associate pressing this lever to getting food. So every time he presses the lever, he gets food. Okay, and that's continuous reinforcement because every time he presses the lever, he gets food. And there are different schedules of reinforcement, so I'm not going to go super into those, but there's schedules of variable reinforcement, so that's when, there's variable ratio, variable interval. So that means that on an average, they get reinforced however many times he presses the lever. That's variable ratio. And then variable interval is on an average, he gets reinforced every 10 seconds. So maybe sometimes he'll get reinforced after pressing the bar for 2 seconds or after 2 seconds. And then maybe he'll press the bar for 10 seconds and then get it. And then maybe he'll press the bar for 28 seconds and then he'll get it. So it's on an average of 10 or whatever the number is. It can be 2 or 3 or 4 and so on. And then fixed is the exact same number. So fixed is every third time he gets reinforced. So maybe if she was talking about like laundry, if your kid does laundry, every 3 times they do laundry or every 3 loads, they get a candy bar or something. So that's fixed. Every 3, they get a candy bar. And fixed interval is every 10 seconds, the next behavior after 10 seconds has passed, they get reinforced. I kind of went on a tangent there. It is important, it is related, but it's all related to extinction. So with little Sniffy, on each schedule of reinforcement, we didn't implement extinction on every single one, but on a few of them we implemented extinction. So we changed the settings so that when he presses the bar, no matter how many times he presses it, no matter how long it takes, he's not going to get reinforced, no matter what. So there's no longer reinforcement for the behavior. And something that's interesting that happens a lot is an extinction burst. So basically what happens is they try to do the behavior and it doesn't get reinforced. And they're like, what the heck's happening? This is weird. And so then they increase the behavior a whole bunch to see if they can get that reinforcement. And this often happens with parenting and with lots of different behaviors. But let's say that you're trying to put a behavior on extinction and then your kid starts really going crazy and acting out and you're like, see, it didn't work. The extinction didn't even work. It just got worse. And that's fair, but it also could be a sign that it's working because your kid's experiencing an extinction burst, which is just like, I'm just gonna do this as much as I can so I can still maybe see if I can get that reinforcement. And then sometimes they do get the reinforcement. And then unfortunately, you've reinforced the crazy behavior. Something that she was saying in relation to this metaphor is an extinction burst. It might grow really weird or grow thorns, but eventually it will die / reduce. She also talked about extinction bursts in relation to sleep training. How sometimes if you're trying to, stop your kid from crying and to teach them to self-soothe, that they might go crazy and scream and freak out, and then parents just give up because they're like, see, it didn't even work. But it's important to stick with it and to continue to put the behavior on extinction, or the behavior won't go away because it will be reinforced. Anyway, this is applicable to so many things, and it has so many implications. I mean, you name it, and it probably applies somehow. It's so interesting and intriguing. And I feel like everyone should take this class because it's so interesting and applicable. And I feel like it's going to completely change who I am as a person and how I'm going to parent and how I'm going to be a friend and how I'm going to be a wife and a mother. I already said parent, but you know what I mean. A sister, an FSY counselor, because we were talking about ignoring bad behavior and reinforcing good behavior, right? Catching your child doing good rather than getting after them for doing bad, reinforcing the good behavior. Oh, thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for doing that. And then something that we learned is the PREE, so it's PRE or PREE, the partial reinforcement extinction effect. And basically what this means is it means that if a behavior is not on continuous reinforcement, so if a behavior doesn't get reinforced every single time, maybe it's on a fixed ratio or it's on a fixed interval or variable ratio or a variable interval, it's called an intermittent schedule. So an intermittent schedule is sometimes it gets reinforced and sometimes it doesn't. A continuous reinforcement is it gets reinforced every single time. If it's on an intermittent schedule, so it's on any four of the schedules of reinforcement that I said, FI, FR, VR, VI, it will be harder to extinct a behavior because of the PRE, because of the partial reinforcement extinction effect. This is due to many different reasons. The book talks about specifically 3, and I'm not going to go into those. I think just from my memory, one of them is the frustration hypothesis, one of them is the discrimination theory, or discrimination hypothesis, and then there's one more, but I can't remember, and I don't have the book right with me, I'm sorry. But anyway, so basically, if a behavior is not reinforced every single time, and it's on an intermittent schedule, which is what parenting is, because parents are not around all the time to reinforce something, then it will fight extinction, and it will take longer and be more work to extinct a certain behavior. Because if it's reinforced every single time and then suddenly it stops, it's like, oh, if I keep pressing this bar, nothing's going to happen because I always got food when I press this bar, and now I'm just not. But if you're on a different schedule of reinforcement and there is already times where you're pressing the bar and not getting food, then if you extinct that behavior and you no longer reinforce it at all, it's going to take way longer because they're going to think, maybe the next bar press will give me food. Maybe the next bar press will give me food. And then it doesn't. And then it doesn't. And then it doesn't. And then eventually they learn, but it takes way longer. Now this could have good implications as well. Because if you're trying to teach a good behavior with your kid and you reinforce it on an intermittent schedule, which is what you're going to do because you can't reinforce it every single time because you're not with your kid 24/7 and you're probably not paying attention 24/7, then it will be more likely to stick around. So if there's a certain behavior that you really like let's say politeness, being pleasant, saying thank you, opening the door, things like that, and you praise them, oh, thank you so much for doing that, or good job, or I'm proud of you, or, you smile or give them a nod or, give them a thumbs up, that when you're not around, they're more likely to do that if you are intermittently reinforcing that. So you don't reinforce it every single time, but you reinforce it a lot of time. So anyway, that's just something that's interesting. And so I was thinking about how this is applicable in my life, even with just FSY. I know sometimes the FSY kids are kind of rowdy, a little bit. And rather than giving them a look if they're being rowdy, I'm giving them that attention and I'm reinforcing that behavior. So I'm planning, and this is going to be easier said than done, of ignoring the bad behavior. And that comes to a point, right? Because I've still got to do my job. I've still got to make sure they're safe and things like that. But if they're on their phone during study time, I'm probably not going to be trying to give them a whole bunch of, I'm probably not going to give them a whole bunch of attention because that's probably reinforcing for them. So instead, I'm just going to praise when they do good things and catch them doing good and be sincere and thankful in this reinforcement. And I'm going to water the behavior. You know what I mean? So hopefully you learned something new. I feel like there's so much more to talk about, but that's kind of all I'm going to share for now. So hopefully you've learned about strategic watering and to water the seeds and water the behaviors that you like, and to stop watering the behaviors and the seeds and the plants that you don't like. And hopefully those behaviors over time will wither and die. Keep in mind, though, that there may be an extinction burst, and the behavior may increase in intensity or frequency after you put it on extinction, because they're like, I'm not being reinforced. Maybe if I, act up even more, I'll get that reinforcement. And then when they get it, they're reinforced to act up so that they can get it. But if you keep and maintain the course, you stay the course, and you continue to put that behavior on extinction, as in you don't reinforce the behavior, whatever the reinforcing thing may be. There's lots of different reinforcing things. I think there's an endless limit, or there's an endless amount, actually. But if you stop reinforcing it, then eventually this plant will die. Or at least it won't be as strong as plants that you may reinforce and help water to grow stronger. So that's my little spiel on strategic watering. Thank you to my professor of experimental analysis of behavior, because I've learned so much. Keep your eye out for classical conditioning is crazy, because that one is going to be good, hopefully. This one specifically is about operant learning and operant conditioning. Just know that's that, but then classical conditioning is a completely different conditioning, and it's something that I'll be talking about in an episode later to come. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to embrace imperfection, find meaning, satisfaction, and joy from the journey. I'm Kyra, and this is Imperfectly Broken, the podcast.